Florida real estate license is accepted in New Hampshire through a reciprocity agreement. New Hampshire and Florida have a reciprocal licensing agreement that allows real estate licensees licensed in one state to obtain a license in the other state without having to meet all the educational and examination requirements. If you obtain your real estate license in Florida and later move back to New Hampshire, you can apply for a New Hampshire license through reciprocity by following these steps. Firstly, complete the reciprocity application. Obtain the application for real estate license by reciprocity form from the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission, or NHREC. Secondly, meet the residency requirement. You must have been a resident of New Hampshire for at least 30 days prior to applying. Thirdly, submit required documents. Along with the application, you will need to submit your Florida real estate license, proof of education and experience, and fingerprints for a background check. Fourthly, pay the application fee. Submit the required application fee. Fifthly, pass a background check. Your background will be checked for any criminal history. There are additional considerations. You must have been licensed and actively practicing in Florida for at least 2 years prior to applying for reciprocity in New Hampshire. You may need to take additional continuing education courses in New Hampshire to maintain your license. The reciprocity agreement may change over time, so it is always best to contact the NHREC for the most up-to-date information. To elaborate on the process of obtaining a New Hampshire real estate license with a Florida license through reciprocity, it is important to understand each step in detail. The first step involves completing the reciprocity application. You will need to obtain the specific application form from the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission, often available on their website. This form will require you to provide detailed information about your Florida real estate license, your personal background, and your intent to practice real estate in New Hampshire. Ensure that you fill out the application accurately and completely, as any errors or omissions could delay the process. Supporting documentation, such as a copy of your Florida license, will also be required. The second step involves meeting the residency requirement. New Hampshire requires applicants for a real estate license through reciprocity to have been a resident of the state for at least 30 days prior to applying. This requirement is in place to ensure that applicants have a genuine connection to the state and are familiar with local real estate laws and practices. You will need to provide proof of residency, such as a copy of your New Hampshire driver's license or a utility bill in your name. The third step involves submitting the required documents. In addition to the application form, you will need to provide several supporting documents to the NHREC. These documents typically include a certified copy of your Florida real estate license, which verifies that you are currently licensed and in good standing in Florida. You will also need to provide proof of your education and experience in real estate, such as transcripts from any real estate courses you have completed and documentation of your professional experience as a real estate agent in Florida. Furthermore, you will need to submit fingerprints for a background check. The background check is conducted to ensure that you do not have any criminal history that would disqualify you from holding a real estate license in New Hampshire. The fourth step involves paying the application fee. The NHREC charges an application fee for processing applications for real estate licenses through reciprocity. The amount of the fee may vary, so it is important to check the NHREC's website or contact them directly for the most up-to-date information. You will typically be able to pay the fee online or by mail. The fifth step involves passing a background check. The NHREC will conduct a background check on you to ensure that you meet the moral character requirements for holding a real estate license in New Hampshire. The background check will typically involve a review of your criminal history, if any. If you have a criminal record, it does not necessarily mean that you will be denied a license, but the NHREC will consider the nature and severity of the offense, as well as any evidence of rehabilitation. It is also important to be aware of additional considerations. One important consideration is that you must have been licensed and actively practicing in Florida for at least 2 years prior to applying for reciprocity in New Hampshire. This requirement is in place to ensure that applicants have sufficient experience in the real estate industry before being granted a license in New Hampshire. The NHREC may require you to provide documentation of your real estate transactions in Florida to verify your experience. Another consideration is that you may need to take additional continuing education courses in New Hampshire to maintain your license. New Hampshire requires real estate licensees to complete a certain number of continuing education hours each year to stay up to date on the latest laws, regulations, and best practices. The NHREC may require you to take specific courses to meet these requirements. Finally, it is important to remember that the reciprocity agreement between Florida and New Hampshire may change over time. Real estate laws and regulations are subject to change, and the NHREC may modify its requirements for reciprocity. Therefore, it is always best to contact the NHREC directly for the most up-to-date information before applying for a license. By following these steps and being aware of these additional considerations, you can successfully obtain a New Hampshire real estate license with your Florida license through reciprocity. This will allow you to practice real estate in both states, expanding your opportunities and enhancing your career. In summary, the process involves completing the application, meeting the residency requirement, submitting required documents, paying the application fee, and passing a background check. Keep in mind the need for active practice in Florida for 2 years and the potential requirement for additional continuing education in New Hampshire. Always verify the current status of the reciprocity agreement with the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission. Obtaining a real estate license through reciprocity can be a straightforward process if you carefully follow the outlined steps and ensure that you meet all the requirements. Remember to gather all the necessary documentation, including your Florida real estate license, proof of education and experience, and fingerprints for a background check. Submit your application along with the required fee, and be prepared to undergo a background check. Additionally, keep in mind that you must have been actively practicing real estate in Florida for at least 2 years before applying for reciprocity in New Hampshire. This requirement ensures that you have sufficient experience in the field before being granted a license in New Hampshire. Furthermore, be aware that you may need to complete additional continuing education courses in New Hampshire to maintain your license. These courses help you stay up to date on the latest laws, regulations, and best practices in the real estate industry. Finally, it is essential to stay informed about any changes to the reciprocity agreement between Florida and New Hampshire. Real estate laws and regulations are subject to change, so it is always best to contact the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission directly for the most up-to-date information. By taking these steps and staying informed, you can successfully obtain a New Hampshire real estate license and expand your career opportunities. The key is to be proactive, organized, and diligent in completing the application process.